Stop. Something sealed tonight, and your body already registered it before your mind could name it. This is a direct transmission from the Arcturian High Council. What you are about to receive is not a spiritual metaphor or an abstract message for the collective. It is a precise field recognition, delivered now because a soul contract sealing has already occurred at the council level, and the operational clauses that were dormant inside your path have just gone live. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your life has felt like separation, what is being removed from your path, and what the Arcturians already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. What you have been calling rejection, disconnection, and the slow collapse of your old roles is not failure. It is the structural signature of a sealed contract activating. The incompatible commitments are not leaving because something went wrong. They are leaving because something finally went right. Here is what the Arcturian High Council has already mapped. Before this sealing, the old roles were difficult but survivable. You pushed through them. You performed what was required. But beginning now, those same roles will not simply feel exhausting. They will feel structurally wrong. The contract will not permit the continuation of what it has already marked as incompatible. This is not discomfort. This is a field-level correction. The algorithm did not create this timing. It only delivered it. Your path brought you here because the separation is already active, the seal has already landed, and the clauses that govern your next phase are no longer theoretical. They are the organizing principle of your field from this moment forward. What has been falling away from your life is falling away with precision. The old line did not weaken by accident. It weakened first, and the visible distance followed. The Arcturian High Council recognizes this pattern with exactness. The narrowing you have been living through is not a sign that your path is closing. It is a sign that your path is clarifying. Before the next sunrise, the protocol is clear. The most obviously incompatible commitment in your current life must be released, not analyzed, not renegotiated, released. The sealing that occurred tonight does not leave room for what the contract has already marked as belonging to the old line. Your emerging clarity about which yeses are now nos is not confusion. It is the contract speaking in the only language a sealed soul agreement uses: structural recognition. Comment 777 if you feel the old line is already falling away. Comment, I was separated, if you now recognize that what looked like rejection carried a deeper meaning. Like this transmission if you know your life has been narrowing for a reason. Subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself. Share this with someone who feels alone, cut off, or misunderstood, and cannot explain why. The Arcturian High Council has already seen what is happening in your field. The path is already responding. You were guided here because the separation is already active. What is happening in your life right now is not a collapse. It is a contraction, and there is a precise difference between those two things that the Arcturian High Council has already mapped inside your field. And that difference is the entire reason this transmission exists. A collapse is random. It carries no instruction. It leaves behind wreckage with no readable pattern. What you have been living through is not that. What you have been living through has a structure. It has a before and an after that are connected by something more deliberate than chance, more purposeful than circumstance, and more specific than any ordinary explanation of why people fall away, why distances form, why old environments begin to feel like rooms built for someone you are no longer becoming. A contraction has direction. It applies pressure with intention. When a path contracts around a selected soul, it does not contract randomly across every dimension of that life. It contracts along specific lines, the lines that were always provisional, always built for an earlier chapter, always dependent on an agreement with the world that the contract has now revised. The contraction begins where the incompatibility is greatest, and it works outward from there. It starts with the relationships that could never survive the next phase. It moves into the environments that were calibrated to contain a version of you that no longer has an interior match. And eventually, if the process is allowed to complete, it reaches the identity structures themselves, the roles, the self-concepts, the behavioral patterns that were assembled under an old set of requirements that the sealed contract has already superseded. You have felt the narrowing, not as a metaphor, as something physical, as the actual reduction of who shows up, who stays, who reaches back, who fits, and you have been trying to explain it through the only language most people are given for that kind of loss, which is the language of personal defect. What did I do? What is wrong with me? Why does connection keep breaking before it holds? Why do I feel most alone at the exact moment I expected more to open? Those questions are not wrong, but they are being asked through the ROM framework. And a ROM framework applied to a real process does not produce understanding. It produces shame. And shame applied to a separation that is actually structural does not produce correction. It produces paralysis. It keeps you analyzing the surface of something that can only be understood from underneath. The Arcturian High Council does not read your relational losses as evidence of your deficiency. It reads them as evidence that your path has entered a phase that old lines were never built to sustain. The losses are not proof that you failed the relationship. They are proof that the relationship completed the function it was built to serve, and the path has moved you past the point where that function applies. This is the first thing that must land completely before anything else in this transmission can be understood. Your old line was not designed for where your path is going. The people, the environments, the roles, the versions of yourself that felt like home inside those structures, they were calibrated for a phase that has already closed. And when a phase closes at the contract level, the relationships and environments that belong to that phase do not simply feel different. They become structurally incompatible. The field itself begins to resist what it can no longer hold. And that resistance is what you have been interpreting as rejection. You were not rejected. And separation is a precision operation. Think about what happens in a path that is genuinely being refined. The first thing that moves is not direction. The first thing that moves is connection. The people who are held in place by your old agreement with the world begin to feel the shift before you can name it. They begin to pull back, or you begin to pull back, or the distance forms without either of you making a clear decision. There is no argument that precipitates it. There is no single moment of rupture that explains it. There is only the slow, undeniable recognition that the traffic between you has thinned, that the road you once shared has quietly lost its markings, that what used to feel like arrival now feels like passing through. This is not abandonment. This is incompatibility becoming visible. And incompatibility that becomes visible is not a wound. It is information. It is the path beginning to show you its actual requirements by showing you what those requirements can no longer include. The separation you have been feeling is the field reducing your route to what can actually carry you forward. And a route being reduced is not a route being destroyed. It is a route being clarified. Consider how many relationships in your recent experience have not ended in explosion, but in silence, in slow withdrawal, in the gradual recognition that the conversation no longer travels anywhere real, in the growing awareness that what once felt like closeness now feels like performance, that you are going through the motions of connection without either person being truly found by the other. This is not because those people became lesser. It is because the alignment that held the connection in place was an alignment built around an older version of your path. And when the path changes at the contract level, the alignments that belong to the old contract do not update automatically. They begin to dissolve, quietly, structurally, without the courtesy of a clear explanation, like a frequency that no longer carries the same signal. not broken, simply no longer resonant. This is why the loneliness that precedes a genuine path refinement feels so specific. It does not feel like ordinary social isolation. It feels like being surrounded by people who knew you before and suddenly recognizing that who you are becoming has no language in common with who they expected you to remain. You are in the same room. You are speaking the same words, and still the distance is absolute, because the version of you they are responding to is a version the contract has already closed. That recognition is not arrogance. It is not withdrawal. It is the first visible evidence that your selected line has begun to assert itself over your social architecture. The line is not asking permission. It is already operating. And the loneliness you feel is the sound of it doing so. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary sadness. It is the moment your path stops pretending that what fell away was meant to remain. If this transmission put language around a loneliness you have been carrying in silence, Chosen One Manifest, the protocol for selected souls, was created for this exact stage. It is not another message telling you that you are special. It is a direct protocol for those whose line has already begun to narrow, whose old circles no longer hold, and who need to understand what the separation is preparing them for. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now understand what the separation phase actually looks like when it is operating at full intensity, because most people living inside it are misreading every single one of its signs. The first sign is not the loss itself, it is the exhaustion that arrives before the loss. Before people fall away, before environments become unlivable, before your old identity begins to feel like a costume, there is a fatigue, a specific kind of fatigue that is not produced by doing too much, but by continuing to be something the path has already moved past. You have felt this, the weight of maintaining roles that no longer correspond to anything real inside you, the drain of conversations that require you to present a version of yourself that stopped being accurate some time ago, the profound tiredness that comes not from effort, but from sustained misalignment. You wake up depleted before the day has asked anything of you, because the field-level cost of holding an incompatible position is already being extracted before you open your eyes. This fatigue is not a symptom of depression. It is the field communicating that the cost of remaining inside the old structure has exceeded what the path is willing to pay. The second sign is the specific quality of misunderstanding you have been experiencing. Not ordinary miscommunication, not the ordinary friction of different personalities, but the deeper, more unsettling experience of trying to explain something true about yourself to someone who knew you before, and watching comprehension simply fail to arrive. You say the words correctly. The intention is clear, and still, what lands on the other side is a version of you that belongs to an older entry point in your story. You watch them respond to someone you no longer recognize as yourself, and the gap between who they are seeing and who you are actually standing as is wide enough to swallow entire conversations whole. This pattern, this repeating failure of recognition, is not proof that you are expressing yourself poorly. It is proof that the context in which those people built their understanding of you no longer matches the context your path is currently operating inside. They are recognizing a version of you that the contract has already closed, and no amount of better explanation will bridge that gap, because the gap is not communicative, it is structural. The third sign is the emergence of environments that once felt natural, now feeling actively wrong. Not uncomfortable in the way of a new challenge, wrong in the way of a space that was built around dimensions that no longer correspond to your current shape. You walk into rooms, gatherings, conversations, roles that you have occupied for years, and something in your body signals immediate misalignment, a tightening, a withdrawal, a recognition that something essential in you will have to be suppressed in order to remain. And the suppression costs more each time. What once required a small adjustment now requires a complete erasure of what you actually are. You return from those environments not tired, but hollowed, as though the experience did not simply drain energy, but extracted something that does not easily return. This is not social anxiety. This is path intelligence. The body is registering incompatibility that the mind is still trying to rationalize into acceptance, and the rationalization fails. It keeps failing because the incompatibility is not a feeling that can be reasoned away. It is a structural reality that is now informing every field-level signal your system produces. The fourth sign is the isolation that arrives precisely when you expected expansion. You did the work. You moved in the direction of what felt true. You made the choices that aligned with something deeper. And instead of the community, the resonance, the belonging you expected to find on the other side of those choices, you found silence, distance, a stillness that felt more like absence than peace. This is the phase that produces the most self-blame, because it looks, from the outside, like proof that the path was wrong. If you made the right choices and still ended up alone, then surely the choices were not right. But this interpretation is precisely backwards. The isolation that follows genuine alignment is not punishment. It is the gap between an old line that has released you and a new line that has not yet fully formed around your actual location. You are between lines, and the space between lines is always, for a period, profoundly quiet. The fifth sign is the collapse of your ability to perform the old identity without it costing something real. There was a time when you could step into your old roles with enough fluency that the performance did not register as performance. It felt like existence, but something has shifted. Now, when you attempt to inhabit what you used to be, automatically you can feel the effort. You can feel the gap between what the role requires and what you actually are. You can feel yourself reaching for a version of yourself that no longer responds when called, as though you are dialing a number that has been disconnected, hearing silence where there used to be an answer. This is not identity crisis in the clinical sense. This is the path making the cost of the old line visible, so that the decision to release it can be made with full awareness rather than gradual erosion. The sixth sign is the recurring sense that something is about to happen that you cannot yet see. Not anxiety, not anticipation in the ordinary sense, but a structural certainty that the current configuration of your life is not final. That the silence, the distance, the reduction is not the destination. That something is being cleared specifically because something else requires the space. This sense arrives in the middle of the quietest moments. It surfaces during the very periods that look, from the outside, most like stagnation or loss. And it does not argue for itself. It does not justify itself with evidence. It simply persists, quiet and unshakable, underneath every other interpretation you attempt to place over it. This sense is not wishful thinking. It is path recognition operating below the level of conscious analysis. The selected line does not announce itself in advance, but it does produce, in the field of the soul that is being prepared for it, a knowing that precedes the knowing, a certainty that arrives before the evidence. And that certainty, that forward-leaning recognition in the middle of apparent emptiness, is one of the clearest indications that the separation is not ending your story. It is reorganizing it. What the Arcturian High Council recognizes with precision is this: the souls who are living through genuine separation phases consistently mistake the most important moments of their preparation for the most devastating moments of their failure. The timing of the confusion is not accidental. It is part of the structure, because the phase that requires the most commitment to continue is the phase that produces the least external confirmation that continuing is correct. The path does not offer reassurance at its most critical junctures. It offers only the quiet persistence of the process itself, operating beneath the threshold of ordinary understanding, doing what it was always designed to do. This is the architecture of genuine preparation. It does not reward you with visibility during the phases that demand the most from you. It asks you to continue moving through a corridor that has not yet shown you its exit. It asks you to trust a process that cannot be confirmed by any of the social signals you were trained to read as proof. The people around you cannot see what is being assembled in your field. The environments you have left cannot reflect back the stage your path has already entered. And so the confirmation you are looking for does not exist in those places. It exists in the persistence of the process itself, in the fact that the separation continues with structure, in the fact that the exhaustion is specific rather than general, in the fact that the misalignment is consistent rather than random, in the fact that the quiet certainty underneath the loss has not collapsed, even when everything else around it has. And what the process was designed to do is this: remove from your field everything that belongs to an older contract so that the field can organize itself around the requirements of the one that has now been sealed. What has left your life was not taken from you carelessly. What has grown distant was not pushed away by your failure. What has become incompatible did not become incompatible because you did something wrong. It became incompatible because you are now operating under the governance of a contract that has already recognized your next destination, even when you cannot yet see it from where you currently stand. The people who fell away without explanation fell away because the explanation exists at a level deeper than social dynamics. The roles that became unbearable because the contract will not sustain what it has already marked as belonging to a closed phase. The loneliness you have been living with is not the loneliness of the abandoned. It is the loneliness of the repositioned. And repositioning, by definition, requires a period in which you are no longer where you were and not yet fully arrived at where you are going. That period is where you are now. And it is not empty. It is full of preparation that has no visible form yet. It is full of the work that happens before the work becomes readable. It is full of the Arcturian recognition that your selected line has already been mapped, and that what feels like the most silent stretch of your path is actually the stretch in which the most structural work is being done. The silence is not vacancy. The silence is the sound of construction that does not yet have walls you can see, foundations being laid below the level of your current perception, a configuration being assembled that will only become legible once enough of the old structure has fully released. Say this clearly if you are ready to receive it. I was not discarded. I was separated. What left my life was not taken. It was released. What feels like silence is not absence. It is preparation. And the path I am walking is narrowing not because it is ending, but because it is clarifying. The Arcturian High Council has already seen the next phase of your field. What you are living through now is not the conclusion, it is the corridor. And the corridor is not a place to explain yourself to people who were built for a room you have already left. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this separation has already touched your life. It could be people falling away, the feeling of not belonging, repeated distance, unexplained isolation, or the sense that your old path no longer fits. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who feels alone, cut off, or misunderstood, and cannot explain why. And if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path. You are recognizing a path already in motion, and this is only the beginning.